Black revolutionaries, distillery owners, Italian fashion retailers, and Motown Grammy winners all share their best stories never before told in any other media outlets on Detroit is Different. Visit DetroitisDifferent.com or download the Detroit is Different app on Apple's App Store or Google's Play Store.
Let's see. Welcome back to the Detroit is Different podcast. And today was already a rich pregame. I'm finding out about family and everything. It's almost like I feel like it's not going to be explorative. But I got a couple in effect. So couples are always what we need to uplift too. And if you're anywhere in development, new business, you connect with Southwest, but even beyond Southeast Michigan, this couple is definitely someone you should be connected with. You may have already met them, certainly in the ecosystem. They won something that I won, a neighborhood grant, but they're doing work in community, incubating how you can construct things and develop things, because people are throwing this out there, and it's a whole lot more than a YouTube how you do it page and getting a Home Depot credit card. But with that being said, Luis, Tanya, how are you today?
Good.
Wonderful.
Good.
Doing
All right.
great. Today's Friday.
We definitely love Friday. All right, so construction, development, we'll get to all of that, but it always starts with family. Well, that's how we start with this Detroit is Different story, and we were going right into it, and that's why I was like, all right, let's start rolling. All right, what brings y'all people here? How many generations deep in Detroit? What's the connection? Tanya, I already know. We already got some of that story. Louise, we're about to get to you in a second. What brought your people to the D?
Work.
Okay, that's a good reason.
Yep, work. So, as we were talking about earlier, my father came from Mexico in the late 50s, early 60s.
Okay, wait. Now, from my other interview, I'm finding like it's different parts of Mexico. Hence, like I always tell people be like, I hate the Mexican food here. I like the LA Mexican food because it's different regions in Mexico. Mexico is a huge country. Like when I say that, like huge, the map in America, like a lot of maps of Africa and stuff, makes it look like it's small and stuff. Mm-hmm. Mexico is big. Mm-hmm. You probably just go to Cabo. You may have been to
Cancun.
Yeah, Cancun. You may have been to Tijuana, but let me tell you something. That ain't even. It's only a piece. Yeah. So whereabouts in Mexico? North, south, whereabouts?
Be north.
Yeah,
north, right over the border. Nogales, not on Arizona side, but Mexico.
Okay.
So if you was coming through, I guess, Roma, Texas, it's about an hour in. I guess that would be the region of Nuevo León, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And we make a joke, and, Luis, I was able to bring Luis to visit to meet my father in Mexico 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we kind of joke and say, like, there's basically 3 street lights, and if you blink, you miss it. Like, you
Hilarious.
passed it.
So it's a small town.
It's a very, very small town.
Okay.
And so, and I have a lot of great memories of traveling back and forth from Detroit to Mexico with my father as a child, and got to spend time with my grandparents and cross the border and played in the streets of Mexico, and just had a really wonderful childhood between Detroit and Mexico of traveling.
Could they tell did they even tell the small town? Is it like such a small town? Like I say, like they could tell just by the shape of your head, like, oh, you one of them.
Yeah, it was different too because the food is different. So like before we would cross over the border, we'd stop and get real milk because they would drink raw milk, and like it's a very poor town. So when you're different, they know you're from the state, and so raised goats, and my dad loved rooster fighting, and so he was well known and respected and loved. It's almost like pit bull fighting, but they fight roosters. So
down there. Okay. And you said your grandparents there. What did your grandparents do? What was their take on your dad coming to Detroit? What was that feel?
I don't know. Like they were just Spanish speaking. Like I think they were supportive of their kids coming to the state and getting opportunity. They were there. They weren't educated. Mm-hmm. It was just, my grandfather was more like Spaniard. So my grandfather was very fair with blue eyes, and my grandmother was more like Indian, very dark and dark eyes, dark features. And they had 5 kids, and they supported them, and, they went back and forth. So when my dad came from work to Detroit, he came for the road work and construction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let me say this too, also for everybody watching. And I rarely get on these rants because I need to get I need to get more people from Mexico on here. But okay,
We'll help
the
you
whole
out with that.
line that people go, it's like, okay, the states and not the states. So you got to study American history, and they don't really present it the right way. But the reality of even labeling someone that is, so first off, Mexico was imposed upon the region as it was different tribes and different everything, but let's just go with Chicano, right? So that line in the Spanish-American War and the Louisiana Purchase, that was all a part of the same territory. California, Arizona, New Mexico, like the whole concept of labeling someone as you're an illegal, it's like technically this is a new iteration. The United States is relatively a new concept that is only agreed upon by those Western states, or Western civilization. So I just want to present that to people, that this imaginary line was not necessarily accepted by all of these tribes, all of the people a part of these groups. It's something that is relatively new and the extension of a lot of that region. Hence, if you go to like the Grand Canyon or Colorado, Arizona, a lot of those places, you'll say like, damn, some of this stuff looks the same as the stuff in Mexico when you really go through Mexico. I just want to give that.
Yeah,
That's
no,
all.
Thank you.
You know.
That's good. That goes back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. So he came for work, and the reason why he came to Detroit was because in Southwest Detroit, there's a long history of Latinos that came and populated there. There is a lot of families that have been in Detroit in Southwest for 3-4 generations. And so Latinos have been part of Detroit for almost 100 years. But we don't talk about that narrative.
Not often.
Not often. And so the reason why a lot of them migrated to the area is because there was already a lot of Mexicans that were populating there that came for a lot of the automotive industry and the work prior, and the road work, the train station, right? The train tracks, all of those things. There's a long history there. And my mom came, so my father was Mexican and my mom's Italian, and my mom's Southern Italian from Calabria. And so when she came with her father, and she came on a boat. She came on the Andrea Doria, which was like a famous boat that sunk on its second voyage. And so she came when she was 15 with her father and came through Ellis Island and actually got on the train station and came through the Michigan train station.
Wow.
And ended up settling in Detroit.
Wow. So with that, and you guys, they're seeing it twice, but for real, that means that her father had a lot of game. A lot of game. And like then, but especially today. Where about in Italy was your mom?
So my mom is from San Giovanni in Fiore, which is the region is Calabria, which is southern Italy. It's on the tip of the boot, just north of Sicily. So Sicily is down by the water, and then Calabria is more like in the mountain right above.
So even more game because yes, Southern Italian. So like if you know a lot of Italians, they'll say it's like, are you red sauce or white sauce? So like it's like whole different cultures, just like it's different cultures inside of Mexico. It's different cultures inside of just, Detroit, East Side, West Side. But like really like Northern Italy and Southern Italy are like two different worlds. Completely, and I already know like a lot of my African centered people, it's like, yeah, because that's where more of the Moors were and all of that. It's like, yes, it connects right to Morocco, the Mediterranean. I mean, it's its own culture itself.
Yep.
So
so my mom, when she settled and came to Detroit, she had family on the far south side of Southwest. So that community is predominantly all Arab Americans, or now, or it's a Yemenis. Actually, it's a really strong Yemenis. It's over by Roman Village on the other side near Woodward, Patton Park.
Yeah.
That community, East Dearborn. No, it's Detroit.
It's Detroit.
Yeah.
Right
Used to be predominantly all Italian community. And so then eventually they moved to Dearborn and then kept moving. But my mom ended up settling in Detroit, and she ran a bar called Giovanna's Lounge, which is still called Giovanna's Lounge to this day, right in Mexican town. Very well known. A lot of people don't kind of make the connection, but she was between 24th and 25th, and so she ran her own business for 42 years, and she still lives in Southwest Detroit.
Okay, I definitely have a lot of bar questions, but I'm gonna go to Luis, and I have a lot of questions about that because
it was
the
my
entrepreneurship.
groundwork for entrepreneurship.
I was gonna say that's where I go. That's exactly what I was gonna have some questions about. Your peoples, what brings them to the D?
So, my grandmother, I'll start with my father's side. His mother came from Puerto Rico. She
Okay.
came with a military family, and she was a caretaker and nanny for that family. They brought her to the U.S., and then over time she migrated north to New York, and she ended up in the Bronx. And so, my dad's father, he was a merchant marine, so he was from Bangladesh.
Wow.
And so he came over on the ships, and they would migrate into the town or into the Bronx. And so, obviously, darker-hued people, they were more accepted hanging around Puerto Ricans. And so, my grandmother and my grandfather basically moved to Toledo at some point, and then she migrated up here with her kids. And so, at that point, my grandfather went back to his country, and so we didn't have a relationship with our grandfather at that point, but my grandmother, she was one of a kind. Yeah.
Okay.
Grandma Juanita.
All right, so
Mama
okay.
Juanita.
Also, all right. I'm getting a lot of Spanish culture right now, or what is labeled as Spanish, but Latino culture or Latinx culture right now. All right, so the Bronx, which is bustling of that, and Boricua culture, so which is that or Puerto Rican culture. So all right.
And there's a huge population
Huge
there
population.
of Bengali and Puerto Ricans mixed because they built their communities together. Like you said, the Indians were more accepted as the Puerto Ricans, and so there's actually a documentary about it.
And it's pretty amazing. So here we are, all these years later. I'm 46 years old. My father has a sister who migrated from Bangladesh.
Bangladesh.
And so she's come here to New York.
Wow.
Her son is basically thriving, living the American dream, building his career, and she's with him. And so now they're in Queens, I believe. And so they're raising their family there. So they reached out to my dad and said, hey, we'd like to see you. And so he's like, man, I've never really met my other
That
side of the
side.
family. And so we went and spent time with them a couple years ago. And they were telling my dad all these great stories. So he thought his father left him, and that was not the case. And so he found out that his father came home looking for them, and Grandma Juanita just decided to up and leave for whatever reason. And so she came to Detroit. He came to his home in Toledo, no family there, couldn't find him, and so he went back to the old country. So his sister is sharing with him about how his father talked about him every day.
Wow.
Like would share bedtime stories about the two sons that he had in America that he wished he could find. And so when my dad heard that, he was like, wow, I was devastated.
I assume that was probably like a very emotional thing, because I don't know. I mean, I know your dad's older than you.
Yeah.
But
73 now.
So 73 though. So he found that out at what age?
70.
So to find that out at 70, like he's probably living his life thinking like, man, I got a parent that, bounced on me.
Yeah.
And now it's like, it's more layers to this story,
Way more layers.
and a whole like that's a lot. So man, I can only imagine. What was your dad's response to that?
He was touched, He was just, I think he had to internalize all the feelings that he had bottled up in him all these years to think that his father was no good or his father didn't love him or, that whole, whatever you develop, when you feel like you don't have a father figure in your life.
Yeah.
And so he heard stories about how his father got educated and when he came back to Bangladesh and started teaching women out of the home how to read.
Wow.
Back when they wouldn't allow that.
Wow.
And so he was known to be an educator. And so he would open up the home. And so now when migrants or Bengali people come here that are immigrating or that are migrating here are reaching out to him or his sister and saying, we just want to thank you because this is possible, or we learned to read or write, and our kids got educated in the next generation because of what your father did back in the village.
Man,
and
that's
that's
emotional. I can only imagine just, baby boomer men, period. But that almost bring tears to a grown man. It's like, man, your dad, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can only imagine, you know what I'm saying? Somebody coming to America, dropping a message like, yo, straight up, this was the gateway to give me the plug where our family's good. And it's like, wow, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Yep.
So you said that was your dad's side, right?
That's right. Yep.
All right, mom's side.
So mom's side, grandmother was born on a reservation up north here in Michigan called Pashabi Town, just north of Traverse City.
Okay.
And so that's where my grandmother was. My grandfather came up from Texas, Roma, Texas, and he was working on the fields up north. And so he connected with my grandmother, And then over time, they relocated here, River Rouge, and that's where my mom grew up in River Rouge, which might as well be Detroit.
Yeah.
And so,
So your
later on-
grandmother was Native American.
yeah,
And your
grandmother
father.
was Native
and-
American, and then my grandfather was Mexican.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this connection, man, this is like for real. Like y'all family tree is diverse for real. It's
We
like,
laugh and we
talk
say our
about it.
children is like United Nation in one.
Yeah, I was gonna say all types of It's like y'all all get together. It's like, what language are we speaking? Like I don't
It
know.
is pretty cool though because
Yeah.
I think we've been really fortunate for our children to like know their grandparents, right? So they've been exposed to a little bit of all the different cultures, and even when we took his dad back to New York, our kids went with us. So that was the first time they were able to identify or try to figure out what was that part, because that's where the Ali comes from.
Yeah.
A lot of people get confused by that, right? And so even for them, they were like having a hard time identifying with that and trying to figure out like how does that fit with us?
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
like where. Yeah,
Where-
it's
what
like
is
what?
that,
Where do
you
you
know?
worship?
Yeah,
What Muslim? What
and-
temple do you go to?
Right,
That's what I'm
right.
thinking.
And
it
the
would be.
beautiful thing that I'll say that you touched on something when he was talking about, I realized like his aunt, they're Muslim, and I think it was the first time that we've ever kind of like been, I don't want to say embraced, but like had such a intimate, close interaction with a Muslim family that really loved and like opened up their doors to us, to the point like it was really emotional watching his dad, because she was so like profoundly touched that this was her brother and there was this love, and she kept touching him and like
That's
rubbing
deep.
his shoulder and his head and was like my brother, and my kids got to see that, and they were like, and I think that also breaks down barriers when you can see past and separate kind of all this division that we have amongst like whether it's ethnicity, culture, and
Yeah.
religions, right? So for us,
definitely.
I think it was powerful even for our kids to see that and experience that.
So definitely, I can only imagine, and I have so many people that I want to hook you up with, like the people over here from the Muslim Center and Dream Detroit. Shout out Mark Crane and all the work they're doing, because they're doing a lot of redevelopment, which you all were definitely people I was like, yo, I got to hook this up. So we're going to get to the development and construction. But now we got to talk a little bit more bar. All right, so so it is Women's History Month. Your mother was running a bar as a business owner then.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I think, especially like a lot of women business owners or black business owners or Mexican business owners, like you're not thinking that at that age. You're just thinking like, all right, I can make some money. Because there was also a lot of like house bars at the time that people would
Yes.
run like, hey,
Buying pigs.
it's like, hey, the basement door, these
Yeah,
people gonna play cards downstairs and they gonna do what it is. And it usually would be a lot of women that owned a lot of shotguns that would, you know what I'm saying, run a spot like this.
Yep.
And that's what would happen, but serve and know how to deal in this space, because sometimes when we talk about history of things and we just start tying it together, but this is real entrepreneurship. This is knowing how to feed into a community, knowing how to service a community, knowing how to deal with men
Yeah.
and be a woman. What was that like, and did she internalize it like that? And what
Yeah, so
you
my
know?
mom is 83 now, and she's still extremely resilient and strong. And I think a lot of it had to do with the business and the rigor of the running the business, but even the physical work. Like we used to
Carrying
pick up
cases up the
cases, and we
stairs
used to
and down
carry
the
them up and
stairs.
down the case to pack them in. And
Yeah.
she had probably one of the oldest type of business, liquor license that doesn't exist in the city anymore, where she
Wow.
could sell alcohol after hours.
To go.
To go. So
That's big right there.
and my mom, and I will say this, like in honor of History Month and in honor of my mom, Giovanna, who was my first mentor and my role model. When she got in the business, we touched a little bit about this. So when she came to America, she kind of had almost like a rearranged marriage,
Yeah.
right? And he actually was the one that purchased the bar, and then she started her pathway of citizenship. And when things didn't work out between their marriage, she inherited the bar as part of the divorce settlement, because she was on her pathway to citizenship, and it was her only viable income, because I have 4 siblings that she had from that marriage. And so, she needed a way to provide for them. And so she used to tell me that she was scared, so he used to put her in the bar working at nighttime, like in the 70s. and she would have to work by herself. And the first time that somebody ordered a screwdriver, she went behind the counter and got a screwdriver and gave it to them.
Hilarious.
Because she didn't know.
Yeah.
And so that ended up becoming her source of a livable wage to raise her kids when she finally had the courage to finally leave. And so then, she met my father later and after. And it was a hard business. It was a different kind of lifestyle. I didn't realize all the things. And even now we talk about it. And she tells me things that I reflect on. And I just think, wow, like to be in Detroit during that time and run a bar with the unknowns that were happening. And when we were growing up in high school, like in the 90s, it was bad, right? So we had gangs. There was just, you never know who was packing. There'd be bar fights. I'd go down and help her close up at night when I was in high school. And then days I would work. And then when I was done after high school, I worked in the bar for several years. But my mom only had probably equivalent to like a third grade education. But she had her own system of running her business. So she knew how to write down her numbers. She had a little calendar. She had her own accounting system. She had a way of measuring her bottles, the liquor, to know if people were stealing from her. So I had to learn and adapt very quickly to assist her, right, to because that was what she needed. I would write the checks. I would have to collect the inventory, order inventory, sometimes checking in and out, having the registers, a cash business, cash in, cash out, making sure the money's there, swapping shifts, right, with different people that were working. So what I will say is a couple things, like I respect my mom for that, what she had to do. She had to do what she had to do. She had a different life if she chose? Yes, of course. But she was well loved and respected in our community. She always ran a establishment. She was very hospitable. She had the gift of hospitality. So when people came in, she served food. She'd make Italian subs. She'd, have caldo, homemade meatballs, steaks. Like, she always knew how to make people feel welcomed and knew how to generate clientele and business in that kind of way. Always kept a very clean establishment. And my mom is like 4'11". And she was fearless after a certain point that I remember. By the time I was in high school, like, we would have to go in there and she'd be so angry that she would literally grab somebody and like shove them out the door. And my thought process was always like, what would happen if they turned around and swung or whatever? But then I also think that so many people loved my mom and respected her that at some point I realized that nothing would ever happen to her because whoever was there would step up and protect her, But it was hard. It was hard. My lifestyle was very different. So, like, when we talk about high school and stuff, we joke about it. But, like, if it wasn't for Luis, I don't know if I would have graduated from high school and went on. Because our lifestyle where, my mom would work till, she'd have to close up, or we'd go down and close up and make sure we were with her to accompany her. And then she would sleep till 11, 12. So, at a certain point when we got old enough, not like in elementary school, I would have to wake myself up for school, and that was hard because, as a kid, you don't want to go. And I think I probably was ADHD and obviously had learning issues. So I didn't want to go. So Luis would come to my door and knock, and I'd be like, stop coming to my house. No, in high school, but after. But like in high school, he would come and be like, hey, why aren't you in school? And I'd be like, oh, stop.
So I'd wake up her mom.
Yeah.
Okay.
And her mom would be like, Luis,
I was gonna
why
say,
are you here
I was gonna
at
say,
7:30 in the morning? I said, because Tanya's not at school.
That's,
And so, mom would open
that
up
means
that door.
Luis had,
So me and
Luis
Luis
had a little.
She's like, listen, you got to stop coming. You're
right.
messing up my game here. And I was
Yeah, I was
like, no,
gonna
I
say.
need you to graduate. Like, if me and you going to be together, you got to have a diploma. You know what I mean?
Hilarious.
So we've been together since high school.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, but my mom had rebuilt her business at least 3 times in my lifetime that I've seen. So in the 80s, in 84, 86, it caught on fire. And like most Detroiters, didn't have insurance.
Yeah.
And so she had to rebuild from ground up.
From scratch.
And so at some point in my life, I remember her working 3 jobs at a time.
Wow.
It took her years, but she reopened. And then at one point she wanted to sell, and it was a bad deal. Didn't have the right real estate agent or lawyer, and basically just kind of took over the bar, and she had to go through settlement to get it back, and so then rebuilt it again. And so when she retired, she was in her 70s.
Yeah.
She sold Atlantic Contract, And so she's been retired now for 10 years. And it's amazing the quality of life that she's been able to just kind of enjoy the fruits of her labor, because all her life she just worked hard.
I was gonna say, and as I sit and I listen, all I think about, I had my grandfather, my father's father, Don Scott, shout out Don, and my grandma Val. They together ran a nightclub in Cleveland for years. So just understanding that flow of that life is a little bit different, but especially in that perspective, they had the balance. But now, as I hear that story, I definitely want to shout out your mom, because first off, she was thrust into a business that she did not decide. So that's already tough. Like, if you're thrust into a position of like, hey, take over a business in survival, and this isn't like a business you're passionate. I love this. You know what I'm saying? I'm passionate about this. But if somebody said, hey, here's I don't know, an insurance agency, it's like, all right, damn, what am I going to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then you figure that out. Then you build this system. As I'm one to think that education, the value of education for me, I believe, is it provides ideas that we can share. So like my marketing degree, now I can walk in a room with other marketing people and I can say like, all right, let's do a feasibility study. You know what I'm saying? Let's look at, what the target markets will be. Like, we kind of all have things we can agree with, so it moves conversations faster. That's been the key value of the education itself. I also think the networks kind of associated with the right school can open up hella doors. We kind of touched on that with your children. But really the tenacity to be in business, that's something that comes from here. So a person thrust into that even is more so. And then to do it over time, build systems, connect.
Lose it all, rebuild.
That's powerful. You know what I'm saying? Deal with a future boyfriend waking you up at like 2 hours after you've been asleep. Like, yo, stop messing my day up. I'm just messing with you. But this is where like that is one hell of a story. And then also, anytime you're dealing with food, that I learned from my grandparents, food and liquor, like, people think like, oh, it's going to always sell. Like, those are variables.
Yeah.
So like the price can go up. It rarely when it goes up, it rarely goes down. So you know what I'm saying? So and where things are at, knowing the system, and the other beauty of it is you spoke to your mother's social capital.
Yeah.
I always talk about social capital because I think that it's so abundant in Black and brown communities, and other communities it's not as abundant. So that social capital is having that network where I guarantee, and your mom may never open up, but it may have been some people, it may have been some as they say, some lending, some street lending that's been a part of communities like this for forever, because it's not like banks give to us to rebuild or do different things, and that same known factor of if you mess with her, you messing with us.
Yep.
So it's like you only can get that type of respect or juice or credibility, that social capital, because you're an asset to our community. And we want to make sure that this bar exists more than whatever you getting too drunk or whatever, foolishness or, we can a 4-letter word here. So whatever bullshit you on, this is going to be here. And to be a woman and get that type of respect, then I love those stories to be uplifted, because it did happen. But it definitely, I'm not saying it wasn't easy, but that speaks volumes of someone doing it and what that representative was. Who were some of the main people that like worked in the bar? Did she hire a lot of the, did she just kind of...
Local women in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that right there also connects to another layer of social capital. So I'm guessing she was probably like, yeah, you got them two babies, and I know you ain't got no education. Come on, pick up a Tuesday and Thursday.
Yep.
Then they mess up, and it's like,
Yep.
and then, then a year later they come back to your mom and be like, yo, can you please work out for us,
And my mom worked a lot. And I think that's another thing about entrepreneurship. Like, I think when you're self-employed, and there's a difference between being self-employed and being an entrepreneur and having a functioning business that can run without you.
Yeah.
My mom was always present in her business. And I think looking back in hindsight now, I think that she probably regrets that, because she probably could have had more freedom to do other things and enjoy with us. And I think I say that to say it's just like for entrepreneurs to be aware that you have control over your time. That's one of the beautiful things about being an entrepreneur, having your own business. You get inundated in the hustle, right? Like and there's a some point that you got to kind of step back and evaluate like what's important and balance, being profitable,
my
but
kids
also
do? Yeah.
wellness and taking care of your own.
So we're on that point, and I definitely have to cut in, and I want your feedback on this one because I agree. The key thing, I love this, but autonomy. That's what I always say. I'm autonomous. I have the freedom to do more than if I had like a 9 to 5. You got to walk into an office and all of that. But also, it takes a level of trust. Do you think that your mother would have trusted someone else in a position to do, you know what I'm saying? Because that's the other part of being an entrepreneur.
Right. But I will also say that trust is a factor that prevents a lot of us people of color of growing and scaling our business.
I agree. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just a question.
It was, and it's that kind of business, right? It's like you're in a bar business. So like you don't just trust. You don't trust nobody.
Walk in and it's like, all right, how many shots were sold? Because like my grandfather,
your barmaid's boyfriend showed up, and all of a sudden your whole bottle of E&J is gone, and you're like, the register don't match the bottle, so
Yeah, and my mom had her own system. When I tell you she was smart, because she had her own system, she would know how to mark bottles so that she knew, and she had her own formula of like, how many alcohols or shots of like codes were sold versus like what's there and what's not. So
this is what's so funny about my granddad and his nightclub. I'm gonna tell you that same system. My granddad would say, because I've done events and stuff like that, and my granddad would like tear me down. Rest in peace, granddad. He'd be like, "Oh, you doing that shit all wrong." So my granddad, he said, like, if the doors opened at 9. He said, I can be able to project in, like, at first from, like, it'd be 5-minute intervals. Then it'd be 2-minute intervals, like, between, like, 2-minute intervals by, like, 10:45 to 11:45. So what he be doing in his mind of just based on what his pitch count person and how people are going to the bar, he would know who from staff going home early tonight.
Yeah.
So he would already know how many people would need to be going home early by 10:30. Right? So that means like he would be projecting how his night would be no matter what. Like all the time. Like, so it was just always mathematics. And he'd be shaking people's hands, talking to them. Thanks for coming out. Oh, I see you got some new shoes on. But in his mind, it's like, all right, we're at $400. We're at $500. We're only at $600. Hey, security, come here. Hey, you know what I'm saying, Ted? You can go on and go home early. Or go on and we'll get you a drink and you can get a dance. Like, he was always like, it was so numbers driven to him.
So Giovanna knew when the restaurants were going to be having a big night. She knew that the waiters and waitresses were coming on that night. So it might be dead, but you best believe at 10 o'clock, everybody's coming in from the restaurant. So she knew.
Yeah.
And so, food, she'd always cater to people with food, but that was not a moneymaker. That would just get the people in.
Yeah.
So $10 steak night, but then now she's selling, 10 more cases that night.
Yeah.
And so she just had that ability to understand her market, right? And so whether it was restaurant people coming in, whether it was
construction people.
Back in the day, people used to run numbers.
Yeah.
So she knew when that crowd was coming in, when they were going to come in and start playing, hood numbers. And so she would cater to that.
Yeah,
She's
you
like, bring
can.
it.
But I think this goes back to what you said earlier. Like, I think within Detroit, we have all of our different ways of we do our business. So.
And I don't know which one of that may be my phone going off, but all right, we're going to keep rolling.
But alternative way of doing business, right? We talked about that. Like, not things that could really be measured in the way where the typical way of doing business is measured.
It's not going to be from the lens of business school because business schools probably wouldn't understand. And
we call that guerrilla marketing.
Hey, all day. So in this, you all connect. So now I'm going to just jump into, because we in business world, but you all connect in high school. Yeah. So first off, all right, anytime I get a couple here, I always like to ask, like, when did you know you were going to approach Tanya? Like, was it like one of those things? Like,
so
was
I
it like
approached Tanya on Werner and Stair?
We gonna go there?
The and so I'd see this young lady driving around. She'd have a group of girls in the car, and I'm thinking, I'm 14.
Were you in car?
No.
Oh, you were on foot.
I'm on foot.
Okay,
you know what
on foot, approaching women in car.
My boys are up at the corner.
Hilarious.
I'm like, let me go see what's going on,
Right.
And then Tanya's rolling up with her car, and she's got the girls in the car, and I'm thinking,
And wait, before you finish the story, I just got to get this disclaimer. Being a man on foot approaching a woman in a car already takes confidence.
Yes.
But man on foot, like, they don't give enough credit to brothers that do that. You know what I'm saying? Because you almost have to embody, like, she won't say no, she won't say no, she won't say no. You know what I'm saying? Because everything about you, even your friends, if you got friends, like, you ain't got no car, and it's like, I'm just not in one. But now you can pick up the story.
Yep. So I would just say, being approachable and being raised by my mother and father, and then having 4 sisters, and just being respectful.
Okay.
And so I'm standing there, Tanya pulls up, and I say hello.
Okay.
Hello, Tanya, once I knew her name. And so that's what really, she told me, got her after a while, was how respectful and approachable you were. You would say my name, and you would say hello. And that was it, And so that's where it all started at.
Now I got to get the backstory. What were your friends in the car saying?
I don't even remember. You're talking about almost 30 years ago.
Run in the store, give me a pack of Newports.
Who knows? We probably were there to run up in the corner store and get
Because she was from the other side of Verner.
Okay.
So, we're like, oh, look at these girls coming over from, the other side of town.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a good backdrop story, right? Like, so Luis grew up on the other side of Verner, closer to Dick's, and I grew up closer to Patton Park.
Okay.
Clark Park. And so and I would say everything in between had its own unique culture because at the time the gangs were so bad. So depending on, you would literally at
every
that time,
10 blocks.
every 10 blocks it was like
different.
a different gang. And so, it was like, red and black, blue and black, green and black. And so we were also very conscious when we passed different parts of Verner, like we're going in different territories. And people had to be just really conscious of like where you're at. And like when he's talking about hanging out with guys on the corner, I mean, you're talking about 20 guys standing on the corner, right? Yeah. Like, so for you to like, and I would say that like even as a female, like you always had to be extremely aware of your surrounding, how you carried yourself. Also very keen aware that at any moment something could pop off, right? Like so, back to Luis's story, like we were on the other side and very aware that there was, a crowd there. And I think a friend of mine, there was a mutual friend of ours that was at Western that would always be like, oh, they used to call him GQ, right? Doesn't it make sense?
Yeah.
And you got to meet GQ. And
Hilarious.
I'm like, I don't know who you're talking about.
You were talked up before you.
Yeah, before
okay.
and we were like completely
you have
different
folklore.
Opposite sides of the neighborhood. So I truly believe it was destiny.
Okay.
And the first time I met Luis, I got butterflies. That was the first time I ever felt butterflies in my life.
Okay.
And so, again, like, Luis was raised with 2 parents in a very strong household with values. They were Christians, amidst of all of this stuff. And I think that another factor that attracted me to Luis or, like, realized he was different was just the simple fact that he had a father, right?
Wow.
Like, there was just people in our neighborhood, like, a lot. You never seen fathers.
Yeah.
And his dad was a good man. I actually met his dad before I met him.
Wow.
So, that's kind of, the backdrop of that. But when we grew up, like, the neighborhoods were so bad, and we talk about this all the time because we talk about, he ended up at Western because he got kicked out of the different schools, and it was just kind of funny because he was the one that kind of helped me through it. But, people hear me share the story all the time, and I share it all the time because I want people to remember that we're really walking miracles.
Yeah.
To be whole in like having a business that does well and that's respected, and we have the ability to scale and grow and try to help other people. When we were in high school, the lockers were chained. We didn't have doors on the bathroom.
Yeah.
You had to walk through a metal detector.
Toilet paper.
Didn't have toilet paper. Like, I used to walk in the door and walk right back out and like keep going. Like, you know what I'm saying? And there was just
how can a kid learn? How can a kid be in an environment where you can't even use the restroom?
Yeah.
And then how do you go to class?
Yeah, I think I want to contextualize a couple of different things that you touched on. All right, first off, in Detroit, like, because we think of Detroit as such a chocolate city, like, and it's Southwest Detroit. We think of Southwest Detroit as, like, growing up in the 90s, definitely, that's Mexican town. And even before that, that's the thought process always. And during that time, because my sister, like, this is maybe, like, in her 20s, was dating Chicano, a Mexican dude. And then he was talking about like the gang culture over there, and it just blew me away because I'm like, I didn't even realize this was like that much of a gang culture. And this is what I always say, even from going to Northwestern High School, which is a couple different gangs. Shout out Yusef and Zone 8 and from there and all the other stuff. But like it was like a big neighborhood thing. So people can kind of understand this. Like the gang kind of chooses you if you're from the right neighborhood, right? So like I can't spend. So when I went to Northwestern, a lot of the guys I hung around were guys that grew up off Dexter. And I definitely don't consider myself a Dexter dog or a gang member or whatever. But I can tell you this. If one of them ended up in a fight or like whatever in school or on the street or whatever, and I don't respond to that the right way, and I'm going to continue to associate and socialize around these people, that is going to be problems for me as time goes on. So if you live in a neighborhood and it's like big homies, as they say. So a big homie usually when you're like 13 is somebody that's 19 and probably didn't finish school and Lord knows is, trying to make ends meet and enjoy themselves and probably sending off like younger kids to do the wildest stuff on earth. This is like kind of how gang culture starts. Yeah. And then when you start involving different criminal acts that can involve a lot of money, now it's involving a whole industry that connects to it. And some of those industries connect further and further and further up. And this ain't Gangland 101, but I just want to contextualize that sometimes some of the most square people or ambitious people end up in these situations just because that's where you live and it's a part of survival more than it's a part of like being in the culture. So I just want to contextualize that. And in the 90s, gang culture in Southwest Detroit was prevalent.
Yeah. And people would ask why. Like, why were you there? Why do you say you had these hardships? Even though I had good parents.
Yeah.
You are your environment.
Yeah.
And so when you're surrounded by your environment, and some of them are your friends from second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and now you guys are teenagers, you still have that relationship.
Yeah.
They chose a different path, and they've been on that path for a while, and you still interact.
Yeah.
But you treat them as such. But we talk about wrong place and wrong time. True. That's all it takes. So, yeah, I'm saying what's up to the homies on the corner. If the paddy wagon shows up and I happen to be there, whether I'm a good kid or a gang member, I'm going with them.
They can't discern.
They can't discern who's who.
Yep. That, and also, I mean, if problem exists, because this is also like commonplace, and for all I would say, I'm gonna say young men. So for mothers with young men between the ages of like 14 and maybe even up to 24, like the amount of people I know that would just carry pistols almost everywhere we would go is always. So that could be a problem with police. And it's not like you're at 17, you're not going to go to your friend like, is that a licensed firearm that you're carrying with you? No, that's just not the thought process. Like, so some of those circumstances can be that. Some of those circumstances also could be like the problems with people. And then, if you're hanging around a person that they know, okay, this person always carries a pistol and I have a problem with this person that always carries a pistol, probably that person that has a problem will bring a pistol. So these are other nuances of hood life that just become normalized that I know outside of it seem different. And then when you watch it on television, like, BMF or whatever, it looks a certain way. But in real life, it's a lot more of it's more like those family and friend ties.
That's right. Yep.
So with those family and friend ties, after high school, how do you guys get on this path towards, first off, building marriage? So first marriage and then business. Where does that path, how does that come together?
So for me, after high school, I had to find a way out. So I graduated. I knew I wasn't really smart in school, really good at school. I wasn't going to waste money and try to go to college because I just didn't feel like I had what it took. So I joined the military.
What branch?
I joined the Air Force.
You were airman.
Air Force. Okay. And no particular reason why other than a recruiter showed up. He put his photo album on the table and he just sat there. And so I went up there and I seen all the places he had traveled. He had a motorcycle, he had a car, and he had been all over the world. And I just said, sign me up.
All right. So how long were you in service?
So I was active duty from 95 to 2001.
So like almost like
years.
So you just missed what would have took you to Iraq almost.
Yes.
Oh man,
Yeah.
talk about another right place, right time. You was like right in that sweet spot.
What was funny is when I joined the service, because they seen my rap sheet of all the little things of
Yeah.
that happened throughout life.
Yeah.
I had to write an essay to explain like how come I had all these incidents but no felonies.
Yeah.
And so it worked out. I was able to join, and from there I spent about a little over 6 years active duty, and then.
Whereabouts did you go to?
So my first assignment was Warner Robins, Georgia, Robins Air Force Base.
Okay, all
And
right.
that was rough because we're talking about the South, right?
Yeah,
And
that
so-
was
It
rough.
went from hood to
And-
country.
And also, let me tell, because actually another airman told me about that base, and Charles Simmons. They said, man, that was the hottest I've ever been. So like,
Yeah.
hot, muggy, and
Yep.
boy.
Yep.
So you
Well, it was
start
an
there.
exciting time because that's when
Okay.
Outkast came out. That's when
Okay.
Goody Mob came out.
Okay.
You know what you know about the dirty South. It was.
I
Just,
love it.
It was the best thing to be. And so once I got inundated with the culture and I learned that life could move at a slower pace, and I
Yeah.
just kind of accepted that, then it just became a second home for me. So I did that down and then I got transferred to Howard Air Force Base in Panama. So now I was down in the Panama
Panama.
Canal.
Okay,
And
and,
so from-
and let me give some context to Panama too. So Panama has a very close relationship with America. So first off, the Panama Canal, like you just touched on, but also the currency in Panama is U.S. dollars, like straight up. So a lot of the people, Black history, a lot of after Elijah Muhammad died, a lot of the Black people from the Nation of Islam went down to Panama. It's like a lot of other people down in Panama, like Panama accounts and stuff. Like Panama is what I would say like when me and like some of my friends, like Panama, what the Dominican is for the poor man. Panama is for a man with a little bit of money. Let's just put it like that, or people. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's a lot of opportunities with different businesses and a lot of Americans down there. Surprisingly, what was Panama like for you?
Panama was beautiful, and so I really enjoyed my time. Tanya, actually, we were still dating at the time, so she came down to visit me, and so
I know that was fly.
Oh yeah, having that experience of just interacting with the local culture. With the Air Force, what was nice about the Air Force is once you were done with your job for that day, your time off was your time off.
Okay.
And so a lot of other branches, you're military 24/7.
Yeah.
The Air Force, hey, you put in your 8 hours, your 12-hour shift, so you can go explore. And so we would go to the beaches, the clubs. If we weren't scheduled to work the next day, we'd stay the night downtown. And so we really got inundated with the culture and the people. But we closed that base down, and so we turned it over back to the Panamanian government. We had an Air Force base, an Army base, a Navy station, a Marine camp. So we're talking about large bases, and every military installation has its own golf course. So you can think of the size of the property that the United States had there in the military footprint. And so when we turned it all over, because the President Carter signed the treaty that we would turn that back over in the early 2000s or in 99, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And so I shut that base down. I came back, and then I got stationed at MacDill down in Tampa, Florida. And so I was down there for a year. And then from there, that was my last active duty station, and then I came back to Detroit.
All right. So from there, what's your perspective? How do you end up in the construction space? Was your mindset like, okay, because servicemen, this is another reality. Like America always waves the flag for like, we love our vets, but sometimes vets don't end up with the best opportunities. You know what I'm saying? What was your state of mind from there, and was it always like, okay, now you've traveled a little bit, do I want to stay in Detroit? You've definitely been in warmer climates at this point in time. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's your take?
One thing that I did realize is as Northerners, we think that it's beautiful in hot climates, but when you grow up in the North, you're ready for seasonal change because that's what you're adjusted. That's what you're mentally ready for.
It's like a
So when you get in the hot all the time, it's like you don't deal with that well.
It's a bunch of people that have just slammed their phone down like he don't know what he talking about. My bad. I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know.
In the wintertime, we hibernate a little bit. We
Yeah.
save a little bit of money. But when you're in hot weather, it's party time all year round. And so, that was a piece of it that I it was a transition for me. But coming back, my uncle was a union carpenter, and as a kid, I always worked with him. So when he had side jobs, he would pay me a daily rate of $50.
Okay.
And if I worked for him 4 or 5 days in a row, I had
There you
a nice
go.
little wad in my pocket. So so that was my first instinct was I'm going to do construction. So he told me become an electrician, and so I did that. I went to
Okay.
an apprenticeship school. I tried to go the union route, and I couldn't get in. So
Wow.
I took the test. They said I did well. I did an interview. They said I did well. And about 6 months went by. I called them. They said, oh, we could call you in another 4 months maybe. And so I was like, guys, I almost been home a year. Like, I need work. And so I found, just through networking, I found somebody that introduced me to the Associated Builders and Contractors School of Southeast Michigan. And that's a trade school, non-union. And so the first day in class, there's 30 or 40 electricians in the class, and right away, people are like, we're hiring. And so I started work on a Saturday, and that's where I got my experience doing electrical.
All right, so okay, and a couple different things, and I already know like some of them is like we've done work for us, but like IBEW, that's like right there in Southwest Detroit. When I think of Local 58, was that the union that you were looking at?
I was, yeah, because that's the only union for electrical in town. And so I thought that would be my best option, but it just didn't pay.
And that's right there, like in your neighborhood almost. It's like,
Right.
damn, I can walk.
Yeah.
I can walk here. What's going on? That's interesting. In the outreach, and as I have that understanding, and especially like their fight for all labor and being inclusive in it. And Lord knows, I'm sure at this point you're interacting with a lot of those people too. So you know what I'm saying? Like God knows what you've heard over the years of, well, maybe did you try this? Or maybe did you try that? Maybe did you try this? You found the place that you wanted to be. What I guess it's hard to project what the hell they were thinking that was the block for you.
Yeah, it could be just the time in history that we were in. I don't know what level construction was at, but, it should have been an opportunity.
Yeah.
I'd hoped that it would have been an opportunity, but I just couldn't sit around and wait anymore. And
Okay.
so, just making those connections and finding another route, being advantageous, being looking for whatever opportunity might be there. I found a non-union company that hired me. They picked up the tab for my schooling, and so I did 4-year apprenticeship, going to school and working, and got my experience that way.
All right, so now I got to go back to you. So during this time, all right, and long distance relationships is tough. You know what I'm saying? And you working in a bar. I saw people hitting on you like 7 times a night. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like men go to bars just to hit on the woman bartender. So during this time, what's your take as that bond is being built, as he's finding his way? What's where's your perspective at?
Yeah, it was tough. So Luis's pathway was the military, and for me, coming out of the trauma, I think we all kind of came out of during that time frame with really PTSD, but I didn't realize what we were coming out of, right? So it kind of stunts you, and that's when I go back to that comment about trust and being able to grow and figuring it out. And the thing with Southwest Detroit is we're so isolated. I remember even going to Fairlane was so stressful to leave and drive down Michigan
Dearborn.
And roll through Dearborn
Well,
and taking
knows
John
Dearborn.
Kronk and
You got that right.
and not going downtown. So we're just being very isolated. It was just Southwest. When we say Southwest love and Southwest pride, we live it, eat it, breathe it, right? We were just inundated in it, and so I didn't really see college as an opportunity for me, and I really didn't think about I could take over the bar. It just wasn't
You wanted to get away
in
from the bar.
purview.
You wanted to get away from
to
that
this day,
lifestyle.
a lot of people don't. I don't drink. I haven't drank in 20 years,
Wow.
and so for a lot of different reasons. But I mean that also was a factor in playing that out in my life and seeing that and watching people.
So at that point, you all are connecting. You see him coming.
So we have a long distance relationship.
Yeah.
He's coming back and forth. I'm trying to figure it out. And a part of me was really angry with him because I felt like he left me. And I was like, what are we gonna do? And we didn't kind of really commit at that point. And I was like, and so I was trying to figure it out. Well, let me get to the story.
Hilarious.
So
Hilarious.
for me, I had. So my sister married an Italian, and she was living there, and she had lived there for 7 years or something like that, and never had, and I was still going through a lot of different changes, in my life, and he didn't commit, and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. And she was like, why don't you come visit me? And it was the first time that I had went by myself to stay there for like an extended amount of time. The first time I went, my mom, actually, I was 15, and it was so bad, and I was self-destructing so bad that I had grown men calling my mom, threatening to kill me and everybody in the house. And my mom was just mortified. And she was so desperate that she booked a ticket
For you to go.
fly us to Italy. And it was the first time I had ever really been out of the city like that. Like, other than like going to Mexico, but like to fly to Europe and like go there. And it was such a culture shift, but it like really shook me. And it was also a time for me to kind of really rehab myself and like be in the nature and like see that there's a whole world outside of Detroit, which really shifted everything inside of me. So when I came back, I was really kind of reformed and really found some healing, and like would look at life through a different lens.
So it just
coming out of like the inundated of being in an urban life, and then being just completely stripped out and like culturally in a different country. So so when Luis left, I was like, I don't know what to do. And my sister said, come. So I left. I booked a ticket. I made my money
So
from
I
the
come
bar.
home from boot camp after tech school. I'm gone 5 months, thinking I'm coming home and I'm going to see Tanya. And they're like, no, she's gone.
hilarious. You like, hey,
I show you.
yeah. It's like, man. All right, and let me say this too. World travel pre 2020 15, 24, no Google Translate, no Uber, no like right now world travel is almost like easy almost wherever you go if they got the internet. No, really internet ain't really like it's existing, but it's like it's more of a business tool, you know what I'm saying? World travel then was a lot more like, all right, you better know directions well, you better know you know what I'm saying? You better have good good skills at picking up, how to navigate, like almost everything. Like it's completely different now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you could almost drop somebody in the middle of Brazil and they'll figure out some stuff. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah, we was writing letters.
was a good-
We didn't even have email.
that was-
I think I got my first Hotmail account maybe 2 years
That
after I was in.
time. Yeah,
so
waiting
yeah,
for hours at a time.
letters and everything.
Yeah.
So
So I lived there for 6 months and had
Okay.
a lot of healing, and it really just kind of adapted my life. It was also the first time that because we were so young, that I kind of started like really exploring myself and my abilities and who I was and what was I capable of, and like evaluating my life through a different lens. And so when I came back, I still really didn't know the direction. I tried community college for a little while and just couldn't figure it out.
didn't
And it was hard, right? Like we came out of DPS, we didn't have the skill sets that most people had.
yeah.
And then paying for it, like figuring out FAFSA, and my mom, like nobody could figure out how to fill it out. And during that time, they never talked about that stuff out of college, So just kept working, and then there was a workforce program. So at the time, right around that time, in 95, when Luis graduated, I graduated in 94 because I'm a little bit older. Our area was designated as a empowerment zone during the Archer administration. And
wait, I gotta give that context too. So empowerment zones are like if you ever talk to somebody, like you need to get signed up for that government contracting, So part of that government contracting are like there are different zones and designations for places like hub zones, opportunity zones, empowerment zones, and that will like. So basically, if I decide to do business there, I will be given like access to more granting dollars, possibly more lending, possibly I will be given money from government agencies to do business in these places. So like if you happen to like figure out the science of that, and it's a science to it, you can be on a good track for opportunity. I just wanted to get that.
It's all timing. We say that about everything.
Yep.
And so, we had a strong community still, like a base there, but no job opportunities, right? Pipelines, we talked about that. And the Hispanic Manufacturing Center was lured to come back into the area, which is right within our neighborhood. So Toledo and Michigan Ave. And there was a nonprofit organization that was doing a workforce development program with soft skills, and had pretty much kind of came together with like a private public partnership to basically create like a truce with at-risk young adults, which really were previous gang members, and said if you commit to hiring them, they'll come work for you. We'll train them. You know, there was this a partnership that was kind of created between the HMC, which was for Hispanic manufacturing business owners, a nonprofit organization that was doing the job development, and St. Anne's, which was the church, was also involved in like kind of the peace talk around what was happening to be able to bring people from the different neighborhoods to like get a job, right? And so, you know, as Luis mentioned, you know, I'm not saying everybody was affected by gangs, right? And so I came through that program, and it was my first entry into corporate. And so I worked in the administration sector for the only female manufacturing owner who just happened to be Latina as well, which was a huge mentor in my life. Her name was Carmen Munoz, and she was also from Southwest Detroit. And she was, you know, a native Detroiter that had been part of Detroit for 2-3 generations, right? So it was a big deal. And so it was my first opportunity to like kind of get introduced to automotive corporate.
So I want to stop and just point this out too. So also, as much as it's opportunity, it has to look culturally like I can understand it. Hence, that's why representation is so important. I got to see someone that looks like me in that position succeeding. And now it's like, okay, I guess this is a space and place for me to be, you know, and that's very important. So you had an idea of, okay, this is another way. That
and I also had
move.
the support, right, from the staff from the nonprofit organization that was like prepping us and talking us and literally picking us up and driving us.
Cool.
You know, so
Total wraparound services.
Total wraparound services to make sure that the program
That it
was
worked.
going to be successful.
And you're one of the people that stuck with that program. When does it hit you that like, okay, he's kind of over here doing this.
Yeah.
I'm over here doing this. We may be able to come together.
We were still just long term at that. We were both trying to figure it out, going back and forth, keep going. I ended up getting recruited by one of the angel investors that helped set up the HMC, who was South African. It was very interesting when you think about the investment that's here and how a lot of these corporation deals are set up for minority contractors or minority businesses at scale at that level. And offered me a job out in Clawson. And by this time, I had enough money. I was, you know, bought a car, got a loan, was working both businesses with the daytime and nighttime at the bar, and decided, like, okay, I'm going to do this, you know. But this goes back to something you said, too. I was working out in Clawson. It was a BMW minority supplier and import-exports, and I hated it. I hated it. I hated it because I couldn't adapt. But what I also realized is that they were no different except they had money.
Yeah.
And so people came to work smelling like alcohol, you know, did drugs and like.
It was the same.
Same thing, right?
It's the same
just
culture.
Same culture, except, you know, this expectation. And I guess I'd never been motivated by money in that kind of way where I felt like I would be more of a support to go back to my own community. And I believed so heavily, and I seen what it did for my life, that I was committed to go back to do the same.
Wow.
So I went back to the organization, which is Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation, Angie Reyes, who, when you talk about history of pillars, right? Like, Angie was the first person to take me camping out of the city when I was 9.
Wow.
Like, she worked for Latino Family Services, which was like a long, you know, organization with a lot of history in our neighborhood that served Latino children around youth programs and stuff. And so here she is. She started this program, this workforce program, because she basically said she was tired of burying kids. She wanted to like go to weddings and graduations, and so she started this, right? Yeah. So now she has an organization. I'm like, I'm gonna come back. Can I come work for you?
Interesting.
She's like, absolutely.
So
when I had told them, the guy literally looked at me and said, if you leave this opportunity, you will regret it for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And I look back now, there's not one thing that I ever regret.
So, all right, I'm mad. I'm so mad. I cut that off because that's a very good point. I'm glad I stopped talking for a second, me blabbering. I want to ask this too, because also making like life decisions like that, especially as you're married now, like I often tell people, like another big thing in business is all your stakeholders. We think our stakeholders are only the people that are like investing in your business or whatever, but it's also family, it's friends, it's people connected to you. where are you at? Where's the relationship at this time when you make that decision? And what are you thinking at the time as she's making this decision to say, all right, because you're on that corporate trajectory where I'm sure if you stay in that, it's like, hey, we got this deal in Detroit now, and then the South Africans like, hey, we about to get this deal in Houston, and we'll get this deal in, Panama. Like, you could have possibly stayed driving that lane. You choose to come back to the community. It takes an encouragement and belief also from those stakeholders. What's your take at this time, Luis? What's going on with you and your path? Like, because that's big.
Yeah. So I'm pushing along. I'm in my apprenticeship now. I'm working. I'm going to school 2 or 3 nights a week on top of working a full-time schedule. And so that's a lot,
Yeah.
So Tanya, she's progressing, doing her thing. And so I was there to support her in whatever way she needed, and she was there to support me. But we were pretty young, and we were just figuring this thing out, We didn't have any kids yet. But once she came back to the neighborhood and we really started talking about how we could start a business together, her supporting me doing my electrical work and some of the dreams that I had about growing into a bigger contractor and becoming a general contractor, it was really kind of the economy that forced us into business. Yeah. So in 2007, 2008, up to 2010, there was no construction going on. And so we had to figure things out. So I was doing side work, helping people do jobs, small jobs, residential. Yeah. So we were remodeling kitchens, basements, bathrooms, things like that. But the foreclosure market really took over. And so that was the only game in town for a while where we were doing cleanouts on foreclosed properties. Wow. And so, a lot of times people think, well, it was the poor people that were foreclosing. No, the poor people were always poor and surviving. Yeah. It was people who had degrees that were lawyers and doctors and nurses, and it was just that bubble. And so here we are cleaning out properties when we first started business for the foreclosure market, for the banks, for the real estate agents.
And that's the start of the business.
That's the start of the business.
And that's such an interesting start, even that you all, like, because this is often how a lot of businesses start. So that's like almost like a living room conversation. Like, look, we can do this together and we can connect. Yeah. And it's going to be some opportunity. And then it's like, all right, we good. And then the market crash. Damn, how do we pivot? You all were ready to pivot as something new and more open.
And I don't know if we were ready to pivot, but we were forced to pivot. Yeah. And we had the grit and the wherewithal that we got to survive. And so, how do we survive? And so prior to this foreclosure market, we actually had the idea that, hey, we've got a little extra income coming in between the two of us. Why don't we buy some foreclosed property, or why don't we buy a fixer-upper? And we did that with our first property, and we did well. It's an amazing story. We bought a property in southwest Detroit, close to Warren and Livernois, right on the border there. Yeah. And this property was run down, but it was a 2-family flat. We bought it. I brought in crews to start doing the work, and just as we were in the beginning stages, the drywall crew was a husband and wife team that were new to the neighborhood, but they had their own business. Nicaragua. They were from Nicaragua, and they said, we want to buy it as is. And I said, well, it's not ready to sell. We just picked it up, and you guys are going to do the drywall for me. And they said, no, we have family that lives down the street. Hilarious. We want this house. And so we were able to sell that house, land contract, and it was a 7-year land contract. And they rented the attic. They fixed that up. They rented the basement, and they rented the second floor, and they lived on the first floor. And so just amazing to see immigrants that come in and how their payment to us sustained us. Yeah. And at first we kind of felt like, well, we're taking advantage because we're charging them an interest rate and it's pretty high. But they were fine with it because they couldn't get a mortgage. And they were making enough income to pay any house note they needed to. They just didn't have access to a mortgage.
So in that story, you're bringing in a whole lot of other variables of things of economics, society, family, culture. So, like, first off, yes, there are barriers of entry to access for people that are, I don't like that illegal immigrant term, period, because back to, like I always end up saying in so much of Detroit is different. Yeah. Well, America itself is a criminal enterprise. It's a stolen land, it's stolen labor, and a stolen loan that establishes this nation. And then to turn around and call something, impose laws that are based on precedent, it's just weird. So, like, So we have to live in that reality. But there are barriers of interest and of entry to doing business a certain way. So you all had an asset and a relationship, back to that social capital, where people could trust in that relationship being honored. Because it's also people that I think that misuse and abuse a person in a position where they can take advantage of it, especially like from the immigration space.
Yeah.
And it happens often. But there's also a way to have equity in that space too. And there's also people that have, they interact and come to America and ain't necessarily having their best days either. Like, it's a mix of realities. It's not as absolute as we make it. But you all were able to start a business in that and build even to another family and connect. So you all almost like your dream, Tanya, came to life and manifested that fast.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other thing I did is I stayed connected to the military. So because we knew that I could do 1 week in a month with the reserves, I continued to do that. And I did that for 26 years and retired in 2022.
Wow.
So once a month I would go out to wherever I was working or stationed for the latter part of my career that was down in Ohio. And so I was a heavy equipment operator. I was part of a special construction unit. And so we would travel. And so they would call me and say, hey, can you go to Africa? Can you go to South America? Can you go to Israel? We got these projects.
Wow.
So even though I was just a part-time reservist or Ohio Air National Guard is what I belonged to, that was always there for me as a backup. And so
It was also our insurance.
that was our
Our
insurance.
health
And so
insurance.
now we're having kids, we're starting business, but without putting all these different pieces together, that's what carried us to be able to do our own business. Otherwise, without insurance, we are not doing any business. We gotta go to work and have insurance for the kids.
So, kid, when's the first kid and where's the business at?
When he was talking about the first investment house, so I was working at DHDC. I was doing everything from like job development, peer mentorship, and then I grew into the fund development director. So at this point, I then was kind of, responsible for corporate relationships and bringing funding into the program, and really a walking testimony of the program, right? And learned a lot, and in that time also created a lot of great relationship in the corporate sector. But I knew in my heart like how important it was. I knew I wanted a family. We knew we wanted a family. We got married in between, and that's how we landed back in Detroit. And so when Luis was talking about going to school for electrician, we were already married. This was like the early years, like the first within 3 years of our marriage. And I knew that I wanted kids, but I also knew that I wanted to raise my children. I wanted to stay home. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to experience that because of my experience being so different. I knew that it was fundamentally important, but I didn't know how we were going to make that work financially.
Yeah.
And so the investment part of it came from understanding that there's value in investments and real estate long term. And so it didn't quite pan out the way we thought, but like it was almost like God had just covered us step by step. So at that time, I'm 7 months pregnant laying tile with Luis at this house.
Hilarious.
And
In the
they
hood,
came
like I'm
in-
there at 11, 12 o'clock at night
Yeah, like-
after working a full day at work
Yeah.
and then going to class. And I'm like, okay, class gets out at 9. I'm going to the investment property and I'm working. And she's like, well, I'm going to meet you there. And I'm like, no, don't come down to the hood. And she's like, no, I'm coming. So here she is, several months pregnant,
Yeah.
laying tile with me on the floor, in a house just like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so so we started in investment properties. We started buying properties, but then when the market fell out, we had a lot of our personal debt. It was really, really hard, scary times. And by this time, we had 2 kids. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to make this work. So that's when the builder's license came, and then we started doing the residential work or the property management to like manage everything that was flooding the market, right, with the foreclosure. And then from there. So I understood how to tap market and how to create business and like how to like generate business, right? So every time we kept pivoting, because you said that. Like I think that's instrumental. Like you have to be able to pivot and being in with the market. And then also like self-financing, right? Like not having access to capital. We didn't understand how to build the operations of the business. We were just doing.
Yeah.
We were just trying to create.
And I wanted to speak to so when I say, whether you're ready or thrust into being ready, I think a younger upstart business is more adaptable to that because nothing's in front of you. Whereas it's just like anything in life. Like if you already know, it's like, all right, 1 second, let me call some of my friends. Something gonna come through. You kind of sit back a little bit and won't pounce on opportunity like somebody new. It's like I'm hopping in, whether it's construction, we there. It's a meeting, it's a seminar, it's a anything. We in the mix. You know what I'm saying? But that's that youthful new business energy that I think that's where the balance comes, because you want to have that youthful energy, hence have enough of a young staff with you too, but you also need some of the wisdom of the age too. But that was
and you
good.
got to have the grit, and then I think you have to have a tolerance for risk, right? So I think growing up poor or growing up the way we did, we were, it's horrible to say, but we just had a comfort level with risk or like not knowing how we were going to pay our bills.
Yeah.
You know, like, so that's not how you start business. Like looking back in hindsight, like, you know, would have did it a lot differently, but the circumstances were what they were. So we made it work.
And in
we
the
kept
worst
adapting.
times when we didn't know where the income was coming from, I would call the military. They would call me and say, "Hey, do you need to, you want to go on this trip?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna be gone a month, 2 months, Tanya." And she's like, "We need the money. Go."
That was
And
a big pivotal. So
Yeah.
when Luis did his first like real long-term deployment to Afghanistan,
Whoa.
we did 11 months separated.
Was that
was a
that
turning
deployment
point.
during a time where it was active conflict going on in Afghanistan
2010.
too?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's active.
So we're building a runway. We're putting up aircraft hangars in southern Afghanistan in the southern Helmand province, just north of Pakistan. And so that's where all the poppy fields and everything were.
So I was
we
just about to
wanted
ask that
interrupt
question.
That operation, because that's
Yeah.
what was funneling all the money into
Yeah.
the Taliban.
Yeah.
And so we're down there building a runway. And I thank God for the Marines, because, you know, we keep our Kevlar gear, we keep our flak vests, and we've got our you know, our guns, but we're there to work. And
Yeah.
so the Marines are surrounding us, and we see these guys coming in and out, you know, from battles and stuff, just protecting the site, because we're in remote locations where the base doesn't even exist
You're
yet.
in the middle of
So it's
nowhere.
not like you're saying,
building
"Hey, I'm
it,
going to
right?
this active base." We're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
And we just put our footprint there last week, and now they fly a couple hundred of us in, and it's a war zone. And we're like, we got to get this thing built as fast as possible, because the aircraft have to land. If they can't land, then, you know.
And that's also another level of like I can imagine like mental stress, because you got the family, you got the business,
Yeah.
but at the same time you got to watch your own damn back of what's going on.
And
And
so for us,
complete
the
job,
guys
you
or
know,
the gals that are deployed, it's once you get into that mindset, you're in that mindset. It's just, I'm here to do a job. I'm focused. It's the spouses that are back home. And so she's thinking about business that we started.
Yeah.
She's thinking about 3 kids,
Yeah.
one 6 months, 5 and 6 year old.
she also think about
I'm
the
gone.
person
And
that
she's
gave her
thinking about me.
butterflies.
She's
Yeah,
like, I
I was
haven't
gonna say
talked to him. You know, in these austere environments, it's not like we got Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So even though it's 2010, you think, oh, well, you can just, you know.
That was
No.
Skype.
Yeah. You know, so I would
Yeah.
Skype maybe once a week, sometimes every 2 or 3 weeks. So she
Yeah.
didn't know what was going on in that time.
Yeah.
And so that level of stress and mental health.
Yeah. So when he came back, that was kind of a game changer for me, because I was like, what would I do if something happened to you, right? Like, how would I survive? How would I be able to raise my kids? It also made me reflect on my mom, right? Like raising 5 kids in Detroit, like by herself. And so, like, and staying home with my kids and sacrificing. And there was a long time where we were just poor. Like, I would have to put, like, thank God at least we had a credit card, because I knew
Yeah.
with my mama, you always pay your bills. You pay your bills. So, like, if I had to put a bill on a credit card and then pay it and figure it out, we just keep plugging it away. But we were upside down for a long, long time. And so just continuing to just think about, like, what's next? How do we pivot next? And so when Luis came back, I said, I'm ready to go back to school. And by this time, I had 3 kids.
Yeah.
And I got into a local program that was in Detroit that was specifically for women in Southwest Detroit. It was through Madonna University. And it was like an off-site campus program for your associate's degree. And I just started plugging away, 1 class at a time.
That's big.
And 3 kids. And I said, Luis, like, I don't want to do residential work. I might as well just go back to work. If we can't make this work, we got to figure it out. And I said, you know, I know a lot of people in Detroit from what I did before. I said, we should try to tap into those networks. And so then I started looking at all the certifications and a lot of my corporate relationships. And there was a mentor who is Frank Venegas, who is the largest Hispanic contracting business in Detroit, if not in the nation. I don't know where he falls in terms of that. But at the time,
Specifically for General Motors, he's the
yeah.
number one minority supplier for General Motors.
So yeah, that'll
Yeah,
definitely put you in
so-
possibly
Yeah,
the largest
and
in
so
the nation.
and at this time he was the owner, he was the only founder left from the Hispanic Manufacturing Center. So he started off in automotive and then grew into different
Yeah.
sectors, and then now has this contracting arm. And he committed to helping us.
Wow, that's
And
big.
he was the one that gave us our first like big project where we were able to kind of like go into the commercial space. And people hear us talk about this one project all the time, but it was a thing that completely changed.
It changes the game.
Changed the game.
He gave us the opportunity to be the prime.
So-
So that means we control the contractors, the subcontractors, we control the buying, purchasing, we control the funding, the money, everything.
So wait, what Louise just said, so like if you're on contracts, especially these large contracts, the prime contractor is the direct contractor. A sub is under the prime. So usually it'll be like an amount of, especially like to get the set asides, as they say, of empowerment or working with brown businesses or working with women businesses. You'll be like a subcontractor kind of associated with a project, but to be the prime, you control the purse strings, but you also have to do the scheduling. You have to execute, which leads to the
You have to fund your project.
Yes. Leads to the next question before I get into like really the banner of like the commercial of this. And this has been a wonderful interview. I love it. We get into the close now. But question one, building relationships with people, because the number one thing that, especially it's always tough when you grow up from the hood and stuff, that we always hear is, we want a job, we want a job, we want a job. Then you become the person that hires people. And sometimes this relationship of making sure you get that productivity from the people you hire becomes like, man, what the hell is going on in this world? How did you all build your team? How did you all build your staff? What type of relationships and bonds are going on? And I guess maybe even on that contract, but even to today, what have you learned about really engaging a staff and a team to connect with your business?
Creating a culture and an excitement for the type of work that we do. And so we are very hyper local focused on Detroit.
Yeah.
And so Detroit having value now that it's never had before. And so us wanting to bring up people and small businesses and organizations that have property and then walk them through the process of how to go from design or idea to like complete renovation. And so it's not just the construction anymore, but it's the design, it's the funding, it's the estimating, it's where the financing might be, it's the grants, it's all of that. And so allowing people to come work with us and for us, but not just for us, but allowing other entrepreneurs to have insight into this whole process and sharing that knowledge every step of the way. So with our hub that we're doing the build out and the development for next to the train station, that's a development. And so we share that information across the board with everybody who's in our circle so that they can understand that they can develop too. And so when you share that knowledge, it really gives people the full experience that you're not just here to do construction, but we're building spaces and places that we can hold on to that's going to create generational wealth.
And you have a different track of that also working with the Hispanic Development Corporation, the Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation. How do you get that buy-in from building a team and that culture that Louise speaks of?
Yeah, I think the reason why the hub was birthed out really came out of the challenges of growing as a minority in the culture, in the industry. It's a very white male dominated industry, and it's a very top down kind of management, and it's a nitty gritty industry. It's nothing nice. And it's very competitive, and you have to have deep pockets. And in construction, it's a lot of money in, a lot of money out. And so I think part of me and Luis organically growing in the way that we have has been kind of birthing my passion for community development. And later on, I did end up getting like as much as I could, and I ended up at U of M in urban planning. And they said, we'll take all your credits. And I landed in the urban planning department, and I fell in love with it. And I was like, people plan our cities? People are planning our cities for us? Like what? Like this is how it works? You know, never being exposed to it. And for me, it connected the construction with the community and like building a city, right? And it really, a city is about its people. And so going through all these different experiences, and we only talked about one, but we've had, we've done HUD work, we've worked for large primes, we worked for small primes, we've done MISTA projects, we've done residential projects, we've been an investment. So like organically growing and like adapting to all of these different sectors and experiences. In the end, we realized like, okay, we can grow, we could take opportunity, but are we going to be able to take people with us? And there's a sense of like when you get to the other side, you realize that who's really profiting from this, right? To go back to why we prioritize the projects that we do and why we hire from our own communities and why we talk about the importance of building Detroit minority contractors for opportunities that are coming, because it's right and it's just. And so it's been very intentional. And so I think the other part of it is like seeing people, like you said, representation matters, and seeing people in these spaces and being able to work with your own people that understand, like, and they're not afraid. It's a safe space to make mistakes, to ask questions, and to learn and to grow. And so direct opportunities are really key. The thing with construction is very competitive. So we don't even do competitive bidding. All of our projects are relationship-based. And that was intentional as well. Like at some point we realized we're no longer chasing the bag. We're going to create our own opportunities with our own people.
And that's big. That's big. So now I want you to give the banner, website, how do people get in contact if they know somebody that just wants to connect. You all dropped some heavy gems. So how do people connect? How do people get in contact? As my phone was going off again.
So
it was serendipity.
So we are, as we built out the Design Build Green Hub, people can Google that, and it's got a lot of information. They can follow us on social media with Instagram. It's AGI Construction Solutions. Same on Facebook, same thing. We put a lot of our updates. In the last year, we've been doing some roundtables around discussions around what really prevents Detroit minority contractors from scaling and growing, and out of that has kind of birthed a panel series from contractor to contractor, mentoring,
we call
and
that
one.
Real Talk.
Real
Okay,
talks.
and wait, let me already tell you guys this. They don't know, and I'm saying this because I'm so connected to this story. Detroit is Different is going to stream one of those discussions live.
Yes.
I don't know when, but we're going to talk it out. It's going to happen live. It's going to be an event. Y'all should connect. Y'all should definitely be connecting from this story for real, for real. If you're really serious about this, don't get in the construction game to get the bag. It is the wrong business to be in. My bad, but continue.
So Real Talk series is really about contractors connecting and being able to ask a lot of hard questions in a safe space. So it's fourth Thursday every month. So our next one is coming up on March 28th. You can find that information on, or you could just Google Real Talk, DFO Real Talk.
Okay.
And
Yep. And it's a
hopefully
place
we'll
to really
launch.
learn.
We'll be launched in September, so we have the rest of the gap financing done for the incubator. the
Wow,
hub.
that's big.
So
That's
we'll
big.
we'll grand launch in September, but we'll be working over the next few months to get there, and so probably by the summer we'll soft launch, but September will be our
big.
grand opening.
That's big.
And we really kind of, this social arm of AGI Construction with DFO was really birthed because the experience and the barriers that we've had, and this is not taught anywhere. There's no school you can sign up for. Even, with the ecosystem of small business support, they talk about business, they talk about retail, but for construction, it's different. You got to know contracts. You got to understand pre-construction. You got to understand the design-built environment. You got to understand all the different sectors. And so no one has ever came to us and said, let's do an assessment of what your capabilities are. And so that's the very first thing you have to do. So when you say you do construction, what type of construction do you do? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to grow? And then let's
a lot of
focus
people
on.
don't even realize where they can go,
Yeah.
right? Where they can grow.
Licensing, permitting,
Yeah.
especially like here and where things go. I mean, you'll show up with your crew and you'll show up and the police will be there and also the
And
permitting.
construction is a
people.
dog-eat-dog business, so most prime contractors will wait for you to make your mistake, and then they'll get rid of you, and you won't get paid, and you'll be out of business.
Yeah.
We're not here for that. We're here, when Tanya says a safe space, this is the place to connect, get opportunities, go through Construction 101, if it's help estimating, if it's help project management, if you just need to hear other people's experiences so that you know what to expect when you walk into this environment. All that is here, and so that will really help you get the contracting 101 that you need.
Okay. All right. With that being said, classic Detroit is different questions because it's two of you. I'm going to bounce one question to you, and then I want both of y'all to answer the last one. So let's see. Who do I want to ask this question to? Because we kind of already had your car story. You're going to be the second one. Your very first car, year, make, and model, year you got it.
86 BMW, bought it used, $4,200, second year in the military.
Okay. Where was the first place you went when you got it?
It was a stick shift, and I didn't know how to drive a stick shift, and I wanted this car. So I drove around base until I figured out how to drive the stick shift.
Did you burn the clutch?
I did, but manuals are forgiving. So there's not a whole lot of damage you can really do as long as you,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so for people that have, at this point, I mean, cars going to be autonomous. You know what I'm saying? Y'all going to have grandkids, and they going to be like, man, y'all actually used your feet? What are you doing?
So let me put it this way.
That's
That was the
crazy.
first car I purchased. But
Yeah.
prior to that, when I was in high school, my dad came across, he used to go to the auctions, and he came across a 79 Monte Carlo,
Wow.
silver gray, with white leather interior and an A-track. And it had the T-tops.
Oh,
and that
man.
thing got stolen
Yeah, I
on
was
the
gonna
west
say.
side of Detroit off of Stahalan and Southfield.
if
So
you
if
know-
anybody sees that car around, you
gonna
let
say,
me know, because
I
I'm
was gonna
coming to
say.
get
He's
it.
still traumatized.
Cuddies, Monte
by it.
Carlos, and Regals
Still
is
traumatized.
like
Man.
from like 96 to like about 2006,
Yeah.
boy. You were basically I remember my friend's Regal got stolen. It's like it's your car ever gets stolen, it mess with you because you walk out, you look at the parking space, and you like, what did I
Yep.
what? Oh my God.
They got me.
They got me.
It's such a violation.
Yeah, the Monte Carlo, a 79 Monte Carlo. You might as
White
well have
leather
been-
interior?
Oof, you might as well be asking. You might as well be asking for that car to find its way on Belle Isle with somebody else. All right. So now, Tanya, you get this question in.
Okay.
You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks, Woodward and Jefferson. You have to play 2 songs. What 2 songs you playing?
What 2 songs would I play?
Come on, girl. Shane Park, Belle Isle, Woodward and
Right.
Jefferson.
Probably a Mary J. song and a Lauryn Hill, but I couldn't tell you exactly which one at this point.
Okay. Do you want to take the honors of picking one of those songs from those artists?
She might play a little Mary J, but it's springtime. She's going to play Stevie B.
Spring Love.
Spring Love. Latin
Stevie
freestyle.
B. All about people that know Latino culture. Like, okay, Bad Bunny is coming here like for a concert, surprisingly. So if you want to find out how like Latino culture exists now, that's this. But Stevie B was like Bad Bunny before Bad Bunny.
Oh, yeah.
If you know the culture. So if you've seen
I am so impressed right now that you know.
I travel. I know this. You know what I'm saying? Now, let me say this, though, also. If you happen to be at a party and Stevie B is playing, be prepared to really dance and be prepared to turn down alcohol because you will be offered so many. I'm just messing with you. But you will be. They'll be like, hey, you don't want to know. You're just like, hey, I've had enough. I had enough. But yeah, so definitely, I feel that. I feel that vibe. Last question. You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why? That's for both you guys.
Say it again?
You could rename Woodward after one Detroiter. Who would it be and why?
That's a hard one.
I think we have to go for the Southwest community. And
With it.
we had an individual, his name was Frank Lozano. And I'll let you talk a little bit about Frank Lozano, what type of individual he
Well,
was.
then
in your
we'd
life.
have to go real and call it Paquito.
Yeah.
Paquito and the Latin Orchestra Band.
Mm.
So they were the family that owned the hub prior to us buying
Wow.
it. And so they had that that house for 3 generations. That
They
I
were
had.
4 brothers. They all joined the service, different branches. And they got their money together and bought that house for their parents.
Okay.
And so he was an educator by day and a Latin musician by night.
What did he play?
Latin Orchestra Band.
Okay.
Yeah, was very
Big
popular.
band,
Big
back in
band.
the 50s.
Yep. Traveled
Okay.
to Cuba, traveled all over the world.
Played at the Tropicana in Cuba.
Yep.
Wow.
And,
Very
grew up
well
right
known.
there, Southwest Detroit. And then he was also my my elementary principal at Webster in Detroit. So
He'd be like, you know, I used to travel the world. They'd be like, yo, you ain't one, you wasn't nowhere. And then it's like, damn, I guess he was.
Yeah.
Yo, Beautiful. So thank you so much. This was such a fun interview. Like I say, I'm for real. We're gonna live stream one of these.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I want this to
Absolutely.
connect. We just need
Yes.
that Ethernet connection, and it's gonna be fun.
We got it.
We got it.
Detroit is different.
Different,
AGI is
baby.
gonna be. We're building our connection. Y'all see it happening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Peace.
What up, though, Detroit?
That is a Detroit is different.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.